If you had said to me up until a few days ago, hey, I think the Democratic Party and the deep state are ready to abandon President Joe Biden in the name of another nominee, I would have said, well, okay, that's an interesting theory, but there's no real evidence to support that. What do you base it on? However, it may no longer be a baseless claim. An op ed ran the other day in the Washington Post that's starting to make me wonder, has the signal been sent out? In other words, are high level officials inside the Democratic Party and or the deep state ready to try to move Joe Biden out of the way in the name of getting another nominee to seek the presidency and make sure that the Democrats retain the White House? What am I talking about? Hang on, folks. We're going to get into all this in just 1 second. My name is Brian Trippett. I am your front porch conservative. Step on up to my electronic front porch and let's talk. Thinking about the subject of tonight's video, I was reminded of a quote from the film JFK. There's a great scene where Donald Sutherland and Kevin Costner are sitting on a bench in the Washington Mall. And Donald Sutherland's character turns to Kevin Costner's character and says, speaking of John Kennedy, like Caesar, he is surrounded by enemies, and there is something in the wind. Yet it has no face, but everyone is aware of it. Well, after what ran in the Washington Post on Wednesday, it could very well be said that it now has a face, and everyone is definitely in the loop. I take you to a column written by David Ignatius. Headline: Opinion: President Biden should not run again in 2024. Joe Biden launched his candidacy for president in 2019 with the words, "We are in the battle for the soul of this nation." He was right. And though it wasn't obvious at first to many Democrats, he was the best person to wage that fight. He was a genial but also shrewd campaigner for the restoration of what legislators call, quote, regular order. Since then, Biden has had a remarkable string of wins. He defeated President Donald Trump in the 2020 election. He led a Democratic rebuff of Trump's acolytes in the 2022 midterms. His Justice Department systematically prosecuted the January 6th, 21st insurrection that Trump championed. And now, through special counsel Jack Smith, the department is bringing Trump himself to justice. But a little bit further into this op ed, I don't think Biden and Vice President Harris should run for re-election. It is painful to say that given my admiration for much of what they have accomplished. But if he and Harris campaign together in 2024, I think Biden risks undoing his greatest achievement, which was stopping Trump. Biden wrote his political testament in his inaugural address, quote, "When our days are through, our children and our children's children will say of us, they gave their best, they did their duty, they healed a broken land." Mr. President, maybe this is that moment when duty has been served. Biden would carry two big political liabilities in the 2024 campaign. He would be 82 when he began a second term. According to a recent Associated Press NORC poll, 77% of the public, including 69% of Democrats, think he's too old to be effective for 4 more years. Biden's age isn't just a Fox News trope, it's been the subject of dinner table conversations across America this summer. Okay, let's get into this. There have been all kinds of criticisms of Joe Biden's presidency, some of them legit, some of them partisan, some of them anywhere in between. But this is the first time that anybody of any major statue in the Washington press corps and or the deep state, however you want to look at it, has come out and publicly said, "I don't think Joe Biden should run." It's been talked about, it's been whispered, but no one up to this point has been willing to say it this blatantly, this in your face, through one of the most regularly read organizations for news that Democrats and liberals consume. Well, now it's finally happened, but that sort of begs the question: why now? What's going on? And is this the signal? Now, lest you think I'm being a little bit more than conspiratorial about this, let me show you something real quick. This is a tweet from Joe Concha of thehill.com. Between the Washington Post column by David Ignatius today and Scarborough suddenly revealing all these alleged conversations with Democrat lawmakers saying that Biden is too old to run again, it's abundantly clear that the marching orders have gone out. Now, maybe you're sitting there thinking that I and Joe Concha are being conspiratorial about this, but let me show you what was said on Morning Joe just a day or so ago. Folks, do me a favor and take a listen to the following. I think you're going to find this to be very interesting.
Mika and I, everybody we talk to, every political discussion, it talks a lot about Trump, but when it comes to Joe Biden, people say, man, he's too old to run, isn't he? I mean, he's not really going to run. When I say every discussion, I don't mean 99% of the discussions. Every discussion. We got it. I asked Reverend Al if he was hearing it all the time on our show this past week. He's hearing it as well. So, we often will complain about Republicans who will say one thing about Donald Trump off the air and another on air. Well, let me just say, Democrats off the air will say Joe Biden's too old. Why?
Wow, that's pretty telling. Now, everybody has known that Joe Biden is 80 years old. He'll be 81 on his birthday in December. And if he should run and win next year, he'll be 82 upon assuming office and taking the oath. But all of a sudden, everybody's talking about Joe Biden's age. All of a sudden, everybody's talking about a lot of different things related to Joe Biden. And normally, the Washington press corps does everything they can to cover up for a Democratic president, mostly because their ideologies match. But this is just a little bit too weird. It's happened all of a sudden, and it's happened almost simultaneously, as though somebody has finally decided to open up the heavy artillery and start dropping it on Joe Biden. Normally, you'd expect that thing from partisan Republicans, but this is coming from the Washington press corps and people in media who are Democratic sympathizers. Now, let me play you a clip from Glenn Greenwald. He was on with Jesse Waters the other night, and he had some very interesting things to say about Ignatius's piece. So give me just 1 second to get this pulled up. I think you're going to find this to be very interesting. Folks, take a listen to this exchange from Glenn Greenwald.
Glenn Greenwald is an award-winning journalist who I cannot wait to hear what he thinks about the Ignatius bombshell. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, first of all, I was in doubt about this narrative until David Ignatius got on board with it, because as you adeptly pointed out, there is no member of the media more loyal to the CIA and to its narratives than he. Pretty much, if David Ignatius' mouth is moving, it means the CIA is talking. That's been his entire career. I do, though, think it's worth remembering, Jesse, that in 2018 and 2019, Democrats were also very worried about Joe Biden. They started doing a very similar thing. They started saying, look, Joe Biden is not really cognitively the same as what he used to be. We're very worried that Democrats are going to reward him for being loyally at Obama's side. But then once Biden got the nomination, they immediately forgot about that, united behind Biden, and started saying anyone who mentions his cognitive decline is being immoral, even though it came from them in the first.
Okay, that clip is interesting enough, but I want to play one more piece, because to me, this next one is really, really interesting. Listen to Greenwald's last bit of commentary about this piece that ran in the Washington Post.
Absolutely right to point out that there are very influential sectors within the Democratic Party now trying to sabotage him. It's the first time we're seeing really negative press in the media because of it.
You're right about the intel guys might be seeing him during these briefings and realize that he might not make it, which is going to give us Kamala way, way too soon. And so this is a way to kind of short circuit it early. Glenn, thank you so much. I always appreciate your analysis.
Folks, are you beginning to see what I'm talking about? I'm sorry. I'm too old and I'm too cynical, but I've also got my eyes too wide open to not believe what's going on right now is a concerted effort. There are people inside the deep state, the Democratic Party, the media, in some form or combination of those three, that have come to the conclusion there's no way Joe Biden could beat Donald Trump again in a second election, or at a minimum, they're worried about the possibility that Biden couldn't pull it off. Now, they're bringing up the issue of age, but they're also bringing up other factors that are pointing to a lot of negative press that Joe Biden is getting right now that he otherwise would not receive. Listen to this exchange that took place the other morning on CNN. I think this one's very telling. Listen to this.
And he has done, I don't know if it's similar things, but he's sort of told some stories that don't line up quite like this before.
Yeah, this president has a pattern at this point of either inventing or embellishing stories about his own past, his biography. He did it 3 times in one speech last month alone. He claimed he had witnessed a bridge collapse in Pittsburgh when he actually showed up about 6 hours later. He claimed that his grandfather had died just days before he was born himself at the same hospital. In fact, his grandpa died more than a year before in a different state, not the same hospital. And he also repeated a favorite false story that I and others have debunked over and over again about a supposed conversation with an Amtrak train conductor he was friends with, who was actually deceased at the time the conversation would have had to take place. And that's not all. There are some more serious ones, in my view. Previously in his presidency, he claimed at one point he'd been arrested during a civil rights protest when, in other versions of the story, he just said an officer had taken him home from a protest. He said he had visited the Pittsburgh synagogue where worshipers were killed in a 2018 mass shooting. In fact, he had actually spoken to the rabbi, but never went. And he's made a whole bunch of others too. He said at one point, Republicans like to bring this up, he said that he used to drive a tractor trailer, he used to drive an 18-wheeler. Never happened. The White House later clarified he used to drive a school bus at one point as a job briefly. School bus, of course, not an 18-wheeler. So whatever his intentions, whether it's, foggy memory about stuff that's going on decades ago or deliberate embellishment, this is an unfortunate pattern that keeps coming up again and again with Joe Biden.
Okay, that was not Fox News. That was not Newsmax. That was not One American News Network. That was CNN, one of the arms of the Democratic media operation. And now all of a sudden, they're bringing up, hey, he's not telling the truth. He's embellishing stories. Well, I got news for everybody at CNN. He's been doing this for 40 or 50 years. I remember the first time this guy ran for president back in 1988. The whole reason he had to get out of the campaign was due to the fact he got caught plagiarizing from Neil Kinnock's speeches, who was a labor leader in England at the time. I mean, everybody's known about this for years with Joe Biden. It's one of the worst kept secrets in Washington, D.C. But all of a sudden, we're talking about these whoppers that Joe's telling, or possible cognitive decline that Joe Biden's going through. We've got people talking about his age. We've got about openly discussed conversations among Democrats that I can't believe Joe Biden's going to run. Everybody knows he's too old. Polls are being cited. And all of a sudden, it's happening like that. I'm sorry. This is not a coincidence, ladies and gentlemen. There is a move afoot to get Joe Biden to announce that he's not going to run for re-election. Now, lest you think that the Democrats are panicking without reason, folks, take a look at this. This is the latest set of polls that's come out about the presidential election in a head-to-head matchup of Joe Biden against Donald Trump. We go to Real Clear Politics. The polling average, if you take everything in the past 10 polls that have been done, Trump has a lead. Now, you'll sit there and look at that number and go, well, that's a very small lead. That's within inside the margin of error. And you're absolutely right. But may I respectfully point out the following. Almost at no time in 2020 did Donald Trump ever enjoy a lead on Joe Biden. We're now 1 year and 2 months out from a presidential election, a rematch of 2020, and Trump has a lead if you take all the polls in aggregate and average them together. Normally, I don't like doing that, but there is one thing about it that it does do. It shows you a trend line. And even if you take the polls where Biden's got a lead, it's like 1 point, 2 points at the most. Maybe they're tied. And it's all within inside the margin of error. And if you know anything about how the Electoral College goes as it relates to the popular vote, if a Republican is running even in the polls, then odds are it points to a victory in the Electoral College. Now you begin to understand why the deep state and the members of the Democratic Party are getting very nervous. Remember that line from JFK? He is surrounded by enemies. There is something in the wind, yet it has no face, and everybody knows about it. Now, where does it go from here? Now, keep in mind, at the recording of this video, it's the middle of September. The filing deadlines around the country start coming up in individuals somewhere between now and, let's say, Thanksgiving. Joe Biden has got to go to the microphone and say, I've changed my mind. I've looked at all the issues. I've looked at all the factors. I've decided that I am not going to run for re-election. Now, will he do it? Yeah, only time can tell, but there's a lot of pressure being brought to bear to try to make that very thing happen. The signal has been sent. Joe has to be taken out, politically speaking, to make sure that the Democrats can retain the presidency. I've got a feeling I know who the deep state wants. It's definitely not Kamala Harris. She polls worse than Biden does. I have the funny feeling that Governor Slick, aka Gavin Newsom, is who the deep state really wants to run, but they've got to get Joe to announce that he's changed his mind in order to make that happen. Will it happen? Yet to be determined. But that's what I think about it. What do you think? As we start to wrap up this video, please do me some favors as always. Number 1, if you're not a subscriber to the channel, please do so. Number 2, please leave a comment below. I would love to hear what you think about this. Number 3, please share the video around with your friends. Number 4, hit the bell for notifications. I want to make sure you're always aware when new material and videos and live streams are coming out. And finally, please give me a thumbs up. My name is Brian Trippett. I am your front porch conservative, and I'll see you next time.